Yo, what is up, guys? Welcome to the video. I hope your day is going great. Mine is, and I'm still sitting here in awe about yesterday. It was such an amazing event, and the way London Spitfire dominated was absolutely insane. It really did get me thinking. So many of the London Spitfire players were absolutely insane throughout the playoffs. I mean, honestly, every single one of them, from Prophet to Doujin to Birdring, they all played great. And that also got me thinking, who were the top performing players throughout the entire season and the playoffs? So today I bring you guys a top 10 Overwatch League players list after the Overwatch League. Now, the way I'm going to format this list is 50-50. 50% is going to be based off the whole entire season, and then the other 50% will be based off their playoff performance. So it's like who has been the best throughout the season and who is the best right now mixed together. And that will be our top 10 Overwatch League players list after season 1. If you guys are excited for this video, be sure to drop a like. If you enjoy my content, I upload every single day, so do not forget to click that subscription button. Now, let's go ahead and hop into it. At the end of the video, I will also do honorable mentions and compare my list now to the top 10 players list I made at the very beginning of the season. So starting off with ranked number 10, we have EQO from the Philadelphia Fusion. Now, EQO came out of absolutely nowhere at the end of stage 1 and beginning of stage 2. He took the Philadelphia Fusion, in my opinion, what was like a top 8, top 10 team to a top 6, top 4 team. They immediately went from missing the playoffs to going to the finals of stage 2, and this 100% had to do with the flexibility of EQO. Yes, he did take Shadowburn's spot, and I think rightfully so. Anybody who disagrees with that, you just need to go back and watch the footage. Yeah, Shadowburn was an amazing Genji, and he was really good at Pharah as well. But EQO could do the same exact things he did on Genji and Pharah, and then also double down on like 5 more heroes. Hanzo, Junkrat, Tracer, Soldier, McCree. He could literally play it all. He is like a ghetto version of Prophet. Yeah, Philadelphia Fusion was inconsistent a lot, but also when they were doing really good, it was because of EQO and obviously CARP. They lacked in most other areas, and their DPS players really helped them get as far as they did. As for his playoff performance, it was pretty good. He didn't have the best finals performance, but let's be honest, nobody really on the Philadelphia Fusion played great in the finals, not even CARP. So we can't really harp him for that. His performance against New York was great, and his performance against Boston was great. For that reason, we got to give EQO the number 10 spot. Moving on to number 9, we have Striker from the Boston Uprising. Now, going into the regular season, nobody gave Boston Uprising any credit. Almost everybody had them listed at the bottom of their power rankings. We thought they were going to be the Shanghai Dragons, basically. Well, that didn't happen, and one of the biggest reasons was because of Striker, especially during stage 3 when they went on their 10-0 run. He was the man. Obviously, it wasn't just him. Note and Gamsu, Neko, they all played great too, but Striker was that guy. If he didn't play to his best ability, there was a chance they could have lost a game, and he really did play to his best ability all the way to the stage 3 finals against Sabiolbi and New York Excelsior. And yeah, during stage 3, he played incredible every single game. But obviously there was 3 other stages that Boston Uprising didn't play as good as they did in stage 10. During stage 4, it was a little rough for Striker because he had to take over the flex position. Boston Uprising decided to put mistakes on the Widowmaker. That meant he wasn't ever going to swap, and it was on Striker to do all the swapping from Tracer, Brigida, Genji, Hit Scan, Hanzo, whatever it was. Striker was the guy flexing in stage 4, and he definitely was not used to it. All he really ever touched was Tracer and Junkrat through the entire season. Maybe Widowmaker like once or twice, but he was a hard Tracer player and a little bit of Junkrat. So it was a little hard for him to adapt. Going into the playoffs, they did decide to put Striker back on the Widowmaker, and honestly, he gave CARP a run for their money. A lot of people forget, Philadelphia Fusion, it was no easy task for them to get past the Boston Uprising. It was really close. A few less mistakes, and the Boston Uprising could have been in the finals instead of Philly. So due to the fact that Striker was so underrated going into the season, and the way he performed, and how far the Boston Uprising got, you have to give him number 9 on this list. Moving on to number 8, we have Space from the LA Valiant. Now, LA Valiant in the first 2 stages obviously was not the best team. They were really inconsistent. One day they would lose to the Shanghai Dragons, the next day they would somehow beat Seoul Dynasty, who we thought was a really good team at the time. But that all changed when they decided to bench Envy and pick up Space. Their team literally went from a top 8 team to a top 2 team instantly. Most people don't realize that LA Valiant after stage 3 went 16-4. They only lost 4 games in the last 2 stages. That is tied for the best record over those 2 stages with the New York Excelsior. They were the best performing team. And considering they beat NYXL in that last stage, they were the best team in the last 2 stages. And the biggest change they made was Space coming in. Yeah, they got Custa too, and that was a big difference for them as well. But I think Space's performance speaks for itself. Throughout the regular season, the guy was incredible. The only reason he's not higher on this list is because he had to go up against the London Spitfire in the semifinals, and he didn't play his best in that set, which you can't really take anything away from him because everybody who went up against the London got destroyed in the playoffs. So for that reason, we got Space sitting at number 8. Moving on to rank number 7, we have another off tank. It's Fury from the London Spitfire. Now, I'm not going to lie, guys. There's a decent amount of London Spitfire players on this list, but how could you not put them on here? As I said at the beginning of the video, they all played so damn good. In a perfect world, I really do think all 6 of them should make a top 10 players list, but that would have to be a top 10 list based only off of the playoffs. Throughout the regular season, London Spitfire, they had so many ups and downs. And even throughout the regular season, Fury wasn't even the only off tank on the London Spitfire. They had Huyal for half the season. Actually, they had him for more than half the season. They had him for 3 stages out of 4. So Fury didn't even get 100% of the playtime. But it was still pretty clear when he was playing that he was obviously a top 3 off tank in the league. When you think of the best off tanks throughout the season, players like Mako, Space, and Fury come to mind. Then if you combine that with his playoff performance, Fury 100% was the best. The guy was incredible. Simply amazing. Every single diva bomb he threw was absolutely perfect. Sure, he had the help of gesture sometimes on Orisa, but he put them in such clutch positions. If it wasn't for that diva bomb on Volskaya first point when they had no time left, there would have never been no profit 5k. The London Spitfire would have lost that map, and we would have been going into a 5th map, and who knows? Sure, it was Junkertown, a map that London Spitfire was incredible at, but Philadelphia Fusion could have rode the momentum and won that. We could be looking at a different champion right now if it wasn't for that diva bomb. Of course, playing diva is super easy when your team is absolutely dominating, but because of those clutch kills and clutch diva bombs that he got, we have to put Fury at rank number 7. Moving on to number 6, we have another London Spitfire player. It's going to be Doujin this time. Now let's go back to stage 1 first. Doujin was incredible. We were actually talking about him and Jonak being on the same level. Obviously after stage 1 that changed. Doujin kind of disappeared into the shadows and he never really returned to that stage 1 form. Jonak, obviously he went on to be the MVP and the best flex support in the entire league. But what happened to Doujin in the playoffs was crazy. The guy out of nowhere turned into one of the best flex players in the entire world, and that's coming from a guy who played Zenyatta the entire season. His Roadhog was incredible. He literally looked like a Tracer main in the league. He looked like he was London Spitfire's main Tracer. It was absolutely insane. And if you look at all the other flex supports in the league, especially in the playoffs, none of them were able to flex to this guy's level. I can't think of one flex support who is nearly as good at Roadhog and Tracer as Doujin. The hooks he was hitting, the Tracer bombs, the positioning, everything was so good. And obviously the Zenyatta play was also insane. He looked like one of the best Zenyatas throughout the entire playoffs, and because of this, you have to put him at rank 6. Now moving on to number 5, we're not talking about London Spitfire no more. We're going to take a break, and we're going to look at Sabiolby from the New York Excelsior. Now this guy would have been higher if he didn't flop in the playoffs. Obviously during the regular season, he was the best Tracer. I personally would argue and say that Striker and Prophet at certain times were better than him, and those 3 were the best Tracers at certain points. But Sabiolby, he had his moments, especially during stage 2 and then stage 3 playoffs. Sabiolby had the most clutch performances I've seen throughout the entire league, and personally, I was calling him the best Tracer at the end of stage 3. He 100% earned it, but his downfall was that he was just good at Tracer. Sure, he could flex to Widow and do a decent job here and there, but that's it. When it came to the playoffs and it was time for him to flex to Brigida, Hanzo, and other heroes, he just couldn't do it. He was outshined by players like EQO, CARP, and everybody else. The New York Excelsior, yeah, in the second set against Philadelphia Fusion, took it to the 5th map, but in that first set, they got stomped 3-0. The Boston Uprising put a way better fight up against the Philadelphia Fusion than New York Excelsior could have dreamed of. And everybody was looking at Sabiolby to carry. For some reason, he just couldn't. And because of that, I can't put him any higher than number 5. Yeah, his regular season was incredible. New York Excelsior, they played out of their minds. They had the best record. They hardly ever lost. They won 2 out of the 4 stages, but 50% comes from the playoffs, guys, and Sabiolbi just was not there. He couldn't flex. So that's the reason Sabiolbi is number 5. Moving on to rank number 4, we have CARP from the Philadelphia Fusion. Now, he's the second and the last player from Philadelphia Fusion on this list, and clearly he was the best player on that team throughout the season. Yeah, EQO, he performed great, and he was a huge surprise to everybody, but CARP was so damn consistent. He really reminded me of Prophet all the way up until the finals. Obviously, in the finals, he didn't have the best performance. He got outshined by Prophet. Gesture was all over him. It was a rough time. But prior to the finals, when he was going up against New York Excelsior in the semifinal, and when he was going up against the Boston Uprising in the quarterfinal, he played out of his mind, and he was a huge reason that they made it as far as they did. Without CARP playing as good as he did against Boston Uprising, I don't think they would have won. I really don't. And to go back to Striker real quick, he actually played really well against CARP, surprisingly well. But that still didn't stop CARP from carrying that game super hard. And going back to the regular season, most of the time that Philadelphia Fusion won, it was because of CARP. There's no denying that. Stage 1, Stage 2, Stage 3, and Stage 4, he was insane at Widowmaker. He was the best and most consistent Widowmaker throughout the entire season and playoffs. I still think he was even maybe a little bit better than Bergering. He just couldn't handle the pressure from Gesture in the finals. And if I were to make a top 10 list about Widowmakers, CARP would be number 1. I promise you that. The guy is incredible. Everybody was cheering for him to be the MVP. It's just unfortunate he went up against London and Prophet was so damn good. And CARP could easily be higher on this list. The reason he's not is because these next 3 players are incredible, and I'm sure you guys know who they are. Moving on to number 3, we're going back to New York Excelsior. We have Jay Jonak. And wow, what can I say? The guy was the MVP. The stuff he did on Zenyatta throughout the regular season was mind-blowing. He was the highlight reel that nobody expected. He came out of nowhere. I honestly didn't even know who Jonak was. He was nowhere near my top 20 list going into the Overwatch League. Like, the guy wasn't even 18. He came out of nowhere and blew our minds away. Every single moment throughout the regular season was incredible. He deserves to be the MVP 100%, but in the playoffs, I don't know, similar to Sabiolbi, he just wasn't there. He wasn't able to do the things that Doujin was able to do. He couldn't flex to the Roadhog and have world-class performances. He couldn't flex to the Tracer and pop off. And even when he was on Zenyatta, he wasn't doing the things we saw him do in the regular season. Yeah, he was dealing out damage, he was healing his teammates, he had good tranks, but it wasn't like the regular season, and this was also a big reason why New York Excelsior didn't win. Without their 2-star players, Jonak and Sabiolbi, not performing at their best level, it's just hard to put him higher. If Jonak would have had a great playoff performance, I would have put him at number 1 or number 2, but he didn't. And for that reason, he's got to stay at number 3. Now, moving on to number 2, we have the man, the legend, the swag, the king, Gesture coming out from main tank. The guy, incredible. Watching him play on that stage was insane. He was so confident. The way he pressured CARP and EQO and just single-handedly dealt with them throughout the finals was crazy. You guys all know who number 1 is. It's no spoil. It's Prophet. But if Gesture wasn't there creating the space and being as big as a target as he was, Prophet wouldn't have been able to do the things he did. And it's vice versa. It goes the same way. If Prophet wasn't getting all those kills and hitting all those shots and not dying ever, then Gesture wouldn't be able to do the things he did as well. Like, the two are just a great combination. I want to put them both at number 1. Obviously, I can't do that. So I'm going to put Gesture at number 2. The guy earned it. Even throughout the regular season when London Spitfire was struggling, he was still playing good. And that leads me to number 1. The guy throughout the entire season who still played good despite his team sandbagging, throwing, not playing good, wrist injuries, whatever the issue was for London Spitfire, Prophet literally performed every single game. It's actually mind-blowing to think about how incredible this season was for him and how underrated he was. We're talking about a guy who didn't make All-Stars, a guy who wasn't in the MVP race. For some reason, I don't know. How was he not an All-Star? How can you look at the regular season, vote in 4 of the London Spitfire players, and one of them not be Prophet? It blows my mind away, guys. He is so damn good. Go look at his stats throughout the season. Every single match he played, I guarantee you his stats look incredible. Minus like 1 to 3 matches. Other than that, the guy broke records. He had the best KD throughout every single stage on every single hero he touched, whether it was Junkrat, Tracer, Genji, Hanzo, Brigitte. Like, he played everything. Roadhog, Zarya, everything he played, he was the best at, and he did it all the way up to the finals where he had the most clutch performance. So for these reasons, Prophet has to be number one. All right, so here's a side-by-side comparison of my list at the very beginning of the season and my list now. Obviously, there's a lot of differences here. Some of it's the same. Let's just go ahead and start off with number one, Prophet. Yes, I predicted him to be the best player. He was the best player. Moving on to number two, I had Jhin from Seoul Dynasty. I mean, come on. We all thought he was going to be great. We all thought Seoul Dynasty was going to be great. That was a huge flop. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. But hey, we got Gesture now sitting at number two, who actually didn't make my list previously. Moving on to number three, we have Jonak now. But previously, we had Birdring. Now, obviously, Birdring was incredible in stage one, and if he was able to keep that up, he would have been on this list too, probably number one, number two, or number three. Unfortunately, though, he slumped hard for a very long time, and even throughout the playoffs, yeah, he played good, but he wasn't the star of the team. It was Prophet and Gesture. So for that reason, I couldn't put Birdring on my top 10 list. Moving on to number four, before we had Fleta, now we have CARP. Kind of two similar players, right? Fleta, Seoul Dynasty, it's the same situation as Jhin. You know, they underperformed. Yeah, Fleta had a really good performance in stage 3 and stage 1. Other than that, though, it was really inconsistent. Now we have CARP, obviously deserves it from the Philadelphia Fusion. Moving on to number 5, before we had Rascal, now we have Sabiolbi, who was on the list before. He was number 6. Now we have him at number 5, so he moved up a little bit. Moving on to number 6, again, we had Sabiolbi. And now we have Doujin. And Doujin didn't make the list at all before. I honestly didn't know too much about Doujin. I didn't know if he was going to be great or if he was going to be just decent. Well, he proved to us he was great. Moving on to number 7 before, we had Effect. Obviously, again, going into the league, Effect was a player everybody looked at and thought he was going to be great. And he did have some moments, but it was so many lows from him in the Dallas Fuel, you just can't put him on a top 10 list. Now we have Fury from the London Spitfire, who wasn't on my old list at all, but definitely deserves to be there now. Moving on to number 8, before we had Mano from New York. He was close to making the top 10. I'd definitely put him around top 15, maybe even top 13. But there just wasn't room for him. There was too many good players. Now we have Space from the Los Angeles Valiant, and I just had to put Space on here. He came in, and I feel like he saved the Los Angeles Valiant. Moving on to number 9, now we have Striker. Previously we had Miro, and obviously Miro, one of the biggest flops on this list that I had before. He just underperformed throughout the entire season, and I don't even know if he's ever going to be a starter. We'll get into that again some other time. Moving on to number 10, before we had Baby Bay. Now, of course, there was a little bias coming out. I'm not going to lie there. I thought Baby Bay was going to have a really good season. Obviously, that didn't happen. He had an average one. It wasn't great. It wasn't horrible. Shout out to Baby Bay, though, still. We had EQO instead, another guy from the western side. Again, another guy that came out of nowhere. You got to give props to EQO. He really had an incredible season, and that's why we put him at number 10. So that's pretty much it, guys. Let me know if you enjoyed this video down below. Be sure to drop a like on it, leave a comment, subscribe for more daily content, and I'm out of here, guys. Peace.